The member from West Henday had said something here, and I think I need to correct it, actually. The MLA eloquently made a point that the only reason why we're making these decisions is that because we, well, humbly, Mr. Speaker, we all come from a place of privilege, apparently. So normally Conservatives, we don't carry around our little red wagon and tell you about all the bad things that ever happened in our life or what our experiences were. We kind of leave that behind. The opposition tends to make assumptions, perhaps. I wouldn't assert why they say certain things or why they assume things, but I would assume that's kind of where they're coming from. They may not know our histories or what our backgrounds are or the places of which we look at things and what lens we come through. So for the benefit of the others, and I normally don't tell anybody about my history, but I'm going to go down that a little bit, because when I'm talking about Bill 47, reducing red tape and tweaking up the OH&S and covering off some of the other items, it's from that place, Mr. Speaker. So I grew up on a farm. It wasn't a rich farm. It was a mixed farm. We didn't have much at all, but we got by. And the way that we got by, Mr. Speaker, was working. So when the other folks are talking about these long hours of 10 or 12 hours a day, well, that was a cakewalk when I grew up, Mr. Speaker. And I grew up around equipment. I was driving my first gravel truck, a nice 3-ton old Ford, 1960-something, with a 390 in it and an Eaton shift on it, at 9 years old hauling silage, because my dad couldn't afford to hire any farmhands. So I grew up around that. And then I graduated out of that. We got into mixed farming. We had our own sawmill, so I grew up on the sawmill. Now, it wasn't a nice, big, fancy sawmill that some folks may have worked in, the bigger ones. It was a little old head rig, and I had to run the actual power unit for it, and I was the tail sawyer. My father sawed, and my younger brother was 4 years younger than me, well, he was the canter. So we grew up around dangerous equipment the whole time. And then in the winter time, I started getting a little bit older, and then I started running logging crews for my Uncle Ronnie. So at about 19 years old, I'm running crews back in the bush, hand-falling trees, line skidders, doing all that. So this place of privilege, apparently, that I'm at, well, Mr. Speaker, it takes a lot of hard work to get to a place of privilege. At the age of 16, I told my dad, I said, it's great working for you, Dad, and doing all that, but I'm going to have to get some experience in my resume. So I came to Edmonton. I had $17, a bag of cookies, and a sandwich. I ended up getting hired on from a job because I knew somebody there, and I was a laborer on an asphalt crew. And for the next week, I slept in parks, found out different places. Didn't have, work boots and those type of things, but those business owners, they took me under their wing. The gentleman was actually up from that Falher country, and he was a farm kid that ended up building up his own business too. Found out he didn't have boots, didn't have a social insurance card number, didn't have any of these other type of things, kind of took me under his wing and helped me out. And then that guy kept inviting me back every summer to come back and run equipment, eventually run his paving crews. After I went to college, I ended up hiring on with him as an estimator. So I've ran around sawmills, logging industry, did those things. When I was to pay for myself to go to college, I actually took money out of my account that I'd saved up, got a logging permit, went out there and had my own logging operation going so I could pay for it. Found out the hard way of making bad business deals, and the guy that was supposed to buy my wood, it turned out it was a bad deal. He wouldn't pay up. So then I had to really, really dig in deep, Mr. Speaker. So then for the next year in my college, I'm eating tin cans of beans and maybe some tomatoes here and there. Every once in a while, I'd splurge and buy a hamburger every month or so. So these are the type of things that we did. So the paving industry, farming, oh yeah, and then I got into the industrial industry. So after college now I'm privileged. I'm really privileged, Mr. Speaker, because this was just bequeathed to me. I got hired onto a really good project up in the middle of the tundra in the territories, and this was a game changer for me. This is when I actually got to see how these different cultures and all my background experience to that point that I'd got by the sweat of my brow, and some really good people that had saw me working and swept me up and carried me along and mentored me, how this went to work. Well, now I got assigned to the ironworkers. We're putting up a superstructure. So I'm tacked in with these guys, and they're informing me and advising me how this goes together, and safety was always paramount. So now I'm a project coordinator for a major industrial company working in the tundra. That same company, I end up working in the pipeline division, so I end up working doing fiber optics around CP rail going right across the country. And again, I kept advancing through these things. So the lens that I'm looking at from that point, again, is from safety, from being the person on the tools, the kid out in the bush dropping trees, being responsible for others, and making sure that I have all my fingers and toes.